welcome back. It's New Dawn on the People's Daily OGTV 25 UHF, and this morning we are looking at something that may sound or appear strange to you, but it's something that lives with all of us. Corporate governance and the public administration in Nigeria. We want to look at how what needs to be done to really raise the standards, and we have somebody in the house who has been deep in this. Is actually the president of Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. His name is Taiwo Olugbenga Adewale Owo-Kalade. He's our guest this morning. Good morning, Mr. Owo-Kalade.
Yeah, good morning.
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
We'd like to ask you first and foremost, what is corporate governance? This is, I will be frank, I'm an illiterate when it comes to this.
Well, let me firstly say I'm happy to be here, and it's an exciting time. Corporate governance, the concept sounds a bit odd to some people, but it's just like, I'll try and bring it down to the basics. Basically, you're looking at the corporate environment, be it private or public. So that's where the word corporate comes from. So the governance aspect of it is how that corporate environment is governed, looking at the rules, the regulations, the laws guiding organization. Okay. But for every organization, you have all those key stakeholders. You have the owners of the business, you have the managers of the business, you have the customers, you have the employees. These are all, you also have the clients. So these are all stakeholders of that corporation. So the question now is, how do you manage all of these issues effectively towards achieving the purpose for which that business is set up? The corporate governance now talks about those regulations, those laws, those rules that guide that company towards ensuring that all of the interests of all those stakeholders are properly aligned for the purpose of making that business to achieve the purpose for which it's been set up. So corporate governance is strictly the rules, the regulations, and the laws guiding the organization towards achieving the purpose of its being set up.
Okay, good. But we are all aware of the definition of public administration. That's easy for all of us to understand. But now let's now situate this within the context of Nigeria. Generally speaking, from experience, I mean, looking at all you have done in life, the offices that you have held, your experiences with the corporate world, do you think that the Nigerian public life, we have really done so well in terms of keeping to the standards that are expected of us in terms of corporate governance and public administration?
Well, I try to be very practical, and I try. I don't believe in the total condemnation of the system, because I always know that every system is a work in progress. The only difference is the quantum at which you move. So just also for human beings, some move so fast that at 20 they finish their university and they're already working. Some wait until 30, 40 years. And people tell you, okay, what are the international best practices for all of those issues? So in terms of Nigeria, I want to say that we know that there are some key challenges that we're facing, but it will not really be nice to say that we have not moved. And there are some movements. Whether we have moved well enough, when we compare us to other economies, that will now become a subject of discussion, depending on where you come from. But I think, to be sincere with ourselves, we have done some movements, and we can now keep working on those movements to be sure that we quickly get far to where other contemporary nations have actually been.
All right, you've talked about the interest of the different stakeholders involved, in organizations like that, in different organizations. You talked about the owners of the organizations, you talked about the audience, that's of course the customers of the organizations, and of course the real thing that needs to happen. So how do you manage the different interests of these different individuals in a corporate world?
Well, there's what we call stakeholders management process. Stakeholder is still those issues that I've referred to, everyone that has something to do with the business. Let me also quickly say that when you look at that business, some people try to limit it to only the owners, the staff, and whatever. But stakeholders management is much more than that. And that's why you talk about when you set up a business in an environment, what also happens to those community who live there, because you have brought a business and there are going to be some challenges. So they are also part of that stakeholder that we're looking at. So the issue of stakeholder management now becomes a critical factor in ensuring that those things are basically done. So when you have rules and regulations that also determine how all of those interests, one, you have to identify all of those interests as it aligns to that business. And then try and now see how well you manage those interests towards ensuring that everybody feels good. That's why when you see the Niger Delta environment, those people keep lamenting and they keep complaining. Because in spite of the fact that we make huge money from there, they think that we have not given them good returns to make them feel happy. So even if you have people in that environment who don't really have an instant interest in the business in terms of does not have a car, to him, then what then is the essence of having the petrol, the refinery in that area? But because his environment is impacted by the operation of that business, you have to ensure that you understand his interests and align it along with that interest. So that's why you see companies at times saying, oh, government says, okay, you must do CSR, corporate social responsibility, provide borehole, provide good roads, and all of those things. In some environment, they say, oh, if you are generating electricity, give it to that community also, so that they can also benefit, because you cannot be in light and they are in darkness. So you've got to do all of these issues, manage it together, and then ensure that everybody's interest within that system becomes a win-win situation kind of. So that is basically the issue of the management of those processes aligning along.
All right, some people have actually talked about the different groups of businesses that we have, or corporations that we have, the public and the private, and majorly people tend to say that the private actually managed, the principles and of course the interests more than the government. And when you look at the government establishment, you look at private establishment, you see the differences in those things. So what do you think the two groups should do differently to make the company or whatever government, company or business it is that they are doing to flourish and of course get the necessary requirement needed?
The irony of this situation is that rules and regulations that we talk about, managing private establishments, is put in place by the government. And I'll use CAMA as an example, Corporate and Allied Matters Act of 2018, signed into that's a revolution in business management in Nigeria. And it talks about what all these other companies need to do. But the irony is that the government itself that put in place that laws, that signed it off, on the public sector aspect, they do not also have corporate governance procedures. So people now keep saying, how do you align such a situation where you are telling private businesses how they should run themselves, setting those standards, but the same system that you have set up does not meet up with those obligations, and that becomes an analogical situation. A clear example is that the business says that the head of the board that you refer to as the chairperson should not also be the CEO, that the CEO should be the managing director, which means you have separated between the board and the management. The management is those who see to the day-to-day running of the business, and the board is those who oversee those things. So if you are now saying private sector should not marry role of the chairman and that of the MD CEO, but in public sector, you find those things there. You find someone they say, oh, is the chairman, chief executive. Most of these public sectors that you have, most of those organizations, the MD is basically also at times the chairman, and you see those laws clearly there. That was why when they were trying to come up with CAMA, they stepped down the aspect of the public sector. And for us in the private sector, that is ironical. How can you now tell me the best way to run my business, but you refuse to comply with that same situation? So these are some of those challenges that you face. And when you look at the two sectors, if you don't really marry, if you don't allow them to have a good handshake in terms of the right principles, then something will be wrong somewhere. So while one will be moving very well, the other will be having huge challenges. So most of the challenges that you find in the public sector is as a result of the inadequacies of regulations that can guide them when you look at corporate governance issues. So this is why several people in the private sector keep saying, government is not being fair. You are telling us the best way to run our businesses, but you refuse to comply with that same situation. And as long as you keep refusing to comply, those challenges will keep being there. So you see the private sector moving on because they want to ensure that they get the best. But the public sector itself is always the negative one. The irony is that the public sector has a huge impact on how businesses are run. You have the regulatory bodies all over the places who also oversee what we do in the private sector. But themselves don't comply with those rules and regulations. You see how several of them, they don't have a board up to now. And even with the government, it took close to 2 years before they set up some board for several people. And these are abnormal situations in governance. So who oversees the management of that system when you don't have board for those places? So these are some of those areas that people keep saying that government is not being fair by not putting in place the right processes that can make systems to run. Meanwhile, you are putting pressure on the private sector as per how they should run themselves. I think it goes to equity. Basically, it needs to go with the clean line.
How bad is that setback for us as a nation?
It's a huge one. It's a huge one. You know, the bulk of the challenges that we face in Nigeria is because the public sector refuses to do the ideal. You understand? And people keep asking. You have one of the best. You know, I have related so closely with the public sector, and I know that we have one of the best resources that you could have there. Highly trained, experienced, and whatever. So the question therefore is that why then do we refuse to do what is right? At times people say it's for the political reasons, selfish reasons, and whatever. But for whatever it is, as long as you have refused to do the ideal things, then it's not going to be possible to run an effective and an efficient administration. And like I also said, all of the infrastructures that we need to put in place, all of the regulations, they are determined by the public sector. So if you have not allowed the public sector to meet that EU standard, it means that there is a disconnect between the public sector that is meant to regulate or provide those things and the private sector that you are also meant to regulate. So it's a huge setback, and we just hope and pray that government will keep looking at those areas. At the point when they came up with ease of doing business, people applauded, but the question is that even at your own level, how well are you complying with those situations? So those are just that's why you find Nigeria 2 steps forward at times and some steps backwards.
Is Nigeria alone in this, at least on the African continent or among the third world countries, or we're a bit ahead of some countries? Probably let's even situate it in Africa. South Africa, Ghana, and most of those countries, Northern African countries, they seem to be ahead of Nigeria in terms of all of these things we're talking about. Is the gap wide?
Well, as a student of contemporary development, I don't want to be a part of continuous condemnation of Nigeria. Because when you take it up as an holistic issues, there are some areas where we have done so well. And there are some areas, I've listened to people at times, oh, even in this nation, even in this nation, but that's not really being fair. You must take it up holistically. I'm not a fan of the government, but I also try to be very sincere and practical in my situation. What I would say is that when you talk about corporate governance and international best practice, South Africa, in Africa, is rated to be very highly, because they've done so well in terms of contribution to those issues. I really want to say because of the historical antecedents of the foreigners in that environment, but the fact is that they have done so well. And 2 other economies like that. But Nigeria is not as if we have done too badly. It's just that people are saying that because of the position of Nigeria, not only in Africa, our population, but also all over the world, because of the black nation challenge, burden that we carry, we should basically do much more. Then when you also go back, pre-independent, 1954, this is when the Awolowo's of this world were there. We have moved so fast that people now wonder, within then and now, so what has basically happened? We knew when we had television. Countries, some Western countries never had it before us. We need those that Awolowo put in place. So if we have kept moving at that level, we will not really become a beggar nation to many of these Western nations who are never where we were as at that time. So when people lament and they complain, it's basically because of where we'll be coming from and where we now find ourselves. Also look at the trade facilities. So many years ago, we knew where we were. But for so many years, those is just wiped out. We never had them. Until 2 years ago when we now started having some of these issues again, as if we're coming from the dark. Also look at the roads. Lagos, Ibadan, Express Road. How do you want to tell yourself that at the point when the 40 started it was a matter of you could do toll gate to toll gate for about 30 minutes. And at that time, they will be doing adverts and then cautioning people, don't rush on that road so that you don't rush to death. But 16 years, 20 years down the line, we are starting all over again to build our roads. And that's unfortunate. That is public sector induced. The issue of toll gate that they just came up with now. Toll gate used to be with us all over, who are used to those attitude of paying toll gate until another government came and said for whatever reason we didn't need it. And now, another 15, 20 years after, we're now coming back to it. So the issue is, why are we not consistent in policy formulation? There's nothing wrong in toll gates. It's the easiest means of generating money to manage those infrastructures. So, but we are never consistent with our procedures. Some people, government will come and they will condemn those things, and everybody will clap. Okay, no, that's the right way, whatever. And 20 years after, you will now come back to that same issue. So, look at also Lagos, Sango, Abeokuta Express Road. So many years ago, that was the alternative. When we are coming here today, we had to go and take Lagos, Shagamu Express to come here. When we have just done Lagos, Sango, kind of. So the question is, what actually happened? That every infrastructure that we have had 15, 30, 40 years ago just became like a non-existent thing, and you have to start all over again. That is the gap of the public sector, not making. So you can along all of those areas. I have a friend. I have some people who have petrol stations around Sango or Abeokuta Road, and those places have been locked for the past 3-4 months because of that construction. You can imagine the impact on the economy of that company and of that family. So those are those critical challenges that Nigerians face. You cannot tie yourself to government policy because you are never too sure whether they will never want to come back. Right. And you don't find that one with the private sector. Okay,
moving forward now, you've identified the fact that the public sector needs to be consistent. Is it possible that the government, the public sector actually go entirely independent of whatever political party is in power or whatever government or change in government that has taken place?
Well, that's another major challenge that is locally affecting us. A government comes and then it reverses all over. All of those things that people have done. The refinery was at the tail end of Obasanjo's government, was privatized and then given to Dangote to run. Another person came a year ago and they returned that man's money. And as if within then and now, we would have been able to find a solution. The same Dangote that would refuse to sell that refinery to, we are now the one depending on him to finish his own private refinery for Nigerian economy and different African economy to get itself out. It's the same economy that you now find NNPC struggling to now pay heavily to buy 20% out of that one. So if NNPC knew that refinery was the best way to go, why is it that it's been difficult for them to run their own refinery? Why are you now struggling to raise money to go and support a Dangote business where you could use the same money to run your own base? I think it's even, I don't want to call it a shame, but I think something is missing somewhere. If you had been in NNPC for all these whiles and you could not run your own effectively, and one man came and put up his own, and I said, okay, for strategic reason, you want to buy 20%, then something is wrong somewhere. If that man had been like NNPC, will you still have a refinery to run? So these are huge moral burdens that does not make people like us who are in corporate governance to feel so happy the way we run this system. And that is why government needs to talk to the way of doing business. And that's why people are saying the government should get out of business and just allow people to basically run it so that we can move on.
The atmosphere, is it clearing gradually, or it's still very, very dark? Because there's no way we will remove politics and the tribal sentiments from the way we are ruled and that we're governed, and to a large extent that brings setback for corporate governance in Nigeria. But from experience, in fact, especially going towards 2023, are you seeing light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, the truth is that for me, and I'm not saying that for any selfish reason, I'm a firm believer in Nigeria. I have an absolute trust in this nation. I've looked through all of those parameters. The population works for us. The strength works for us. Even without government, we won a Grammy Award. Give it to those guys. Look at the fintechs, the Paga, sorry if I'm mentioning those names. They are giving the banks a run for their money. So there are huge opportunities in Nigeria. So it's just a matter of having the right set of leadership that can harness those things. And those guys are not even waiting for government. Yeah, those who won Grammy Award never waited for government to package them. They won it. Those who started all those fintechs, I don't want to mention their name for publicity purpose. They never waited for government. They created their own initiatives. And anywhere you go to now, you don't need to go to a bank. Now people don't even think of a bank, except you have to really enter a bank. Just somebody beside you, you do your withdrawals and whatever. So that's as the economy that are growing on their own, leveraging on the strength of Nigerians, our population and whatever. So I have a strong hope in Nigeria, and I have never faltered in my strong hope. I know there are huge of distractions here and there, but the best bet is at times just pretend that those distractions are never really there, and then channel your efforts on the good aspects of Nigeria. If not so, one will go crazy when you look at those distractions. But I refuse to be distracted, and I focus on that goal. When you go into a football field, Messi, Ronaldo, they see the opponents now, but they're after those goals. So no amount of tackling stops them from scoring, and that's why we keep clapping for them and keep clapping for them. So the same thing for me. I believe Nigeria will keep moving on. It might take us some time because of some leadership, but definitely this is a nation that is good.
What's the role of the private sector in creating new frontiers for leadership in Nigeria, political leadership in this country?
The future of Nigeria lies in the hands of the private sector. When I say it lies in the hands, what I mean is that let the government look through into those regulations around providing enabling environments. But you need to tap into the private sector. Look at the pension aspect of the Nigerian nation. As a few months ago, we had about 12 trillion of assets that is there. The government now is even trying to borrow money to be able to use that for infrastructural development. That is standard all over the world. The only fear in Nigeria that we keep shouting of is that if government goes into that money, are we sure that? But government will never fail. The worst, they'll go and print more money, and then they will meet all of those things. That is the way it's done all over the world. You use those pension money to develop long-term infrastructure, because pension money is a long-term fund.
Yes.
So, but when people make noises because of the fear of government and the way we do our things. So the future of Nigeria is bright, and the private sector will always play a huge part. What government only needs to do is to track those things and ensure that regulations catch up, or production is a bit ahead of those things. Okay, look at the issue of the telcos and driving financial inclusion. In Kenya, the telcos drive it. In Nigeria, we say no, it must be the banking sector. I'm not saying this is the best model. I'm not all of this issue, but the issue is that we should not allow regulation to limit us. We should allow regulation to actually enable the process so that we can keep moving on. So the private sector will keep moving on, but it's just that they will be better if we have a public sector that is also as active and as alive as it's supposed to be.
But there's always that albatross, the private sector man, going to government and making a difference. We've seen a few people from private sector going to politics, and they emerge in public offices, and it becomes, in the long run, they become they feel like fish out of water, no difference. Look at that dilemma. You have all the standards, you have all the qualification and all of that. You go into politics and you find yourself in public office, you are not able to make any difference. You don't also think of that?
Yeah, you are right. I think it's more of our environment, and that keeps limiting people. One, we don't really create a platform that allows people to move from private to public easily and from public to private easily. So that if you have that great handshake, it becomes much more easier for all of these dichotomy to be wiped off. Then secondly, earlier I mentioned the fact that the regulatory sector itself, it's not as corporate governance issue is not as good as what you have in the private sector. So when you find a private sector man move into public sector, he does not find those enabling environment that is enjoyed in the private sector. In private sector, whether you like it or not, you must do monthly management meeting, which allows you to look at your books, and then set your goals and they look at the challenge and then you keep moving on until you are there. You must do every quarter board meeting where the board of directors will review the activities of management. And then you're on your toes every time trying to see. But in the public sector, where you don't have a board that can challenge you, you are not even too sure what you want to do. So when you now find yourself there, all of those things that you are used to in the private sector, you don't get to find this in the public sector. So it's like, so what do I need to do? Do I need to call a board meeting every two? I say, okay, but there is no board. Do I need to do this? But this one is not there. So that's why it looks as if a private sector man gets to public sector and he finds it difficult to survive. And the same thing happens to the public sector man who has been made to believe that he's the chairman CEO. So when he gets to the private sector where he's now an MD, and he now has to report regularly to a board, then he's just like, no, this is not where I've come from. There is this joke that I used to say, and it was true. One of my friends moved from private sector to public sector. So when we now met at one of the conferences of our institute, I said, they told me, we said, yes, I moved away from profit and loss to income and expenditure. I said, what does that mean? He said, you know, in your own now, you must wait until we make profit, become well as well. But in the public sector, you just give us allocation. I must finish it. Because if you finish it, next time they'll give you a bigger allocation. But if you don't finish, at the next time they say, oh, this one don't need money. So they will limit. But you cannot find that in private sector. Private sector will generate much more money. And they know that much money will spur them to greater heights.
Okay, like you said, like an addendum to what he said, you know, where you don't have the environment, when you have, for example, the president, you know, having worked in the private sector, become the president of the country, is his responsibility, of course, to create that enabling environment. And I think what we've seen over the years is that even when they get to the public establishment, it's also difficult for them to create this enabling environment. It is their own, within their jurisdiction to create the enabling environment, but they still don't do that. So what do you think is going on in between the lines?
The structure that drives the public sector, you need to understand and situate these are challenges around it. No matter how powerful a president is or a vice president, for him to achieve most of his goals, he must go to the National Assembly. Okay. You understand? And the National Assembly also have their own standards and styles. So you have to find a means lobbying in all of those situations. And lobbying means there must be give and take here and there and all of those issues. As at the last count, there are several universities that the National Assembly have on their own created and imposed on the government. There are several other, I think there is this peace body, I've forgotten their name. The National Assembly asked that it should be created. And the government said, no, we won't need it because they will be doing the same thing, the same role as the police and whatever, and they refuse to. So you have issues like that sometimes you now ask yourself, even if you have the best of intentions, can that environment make you to achieve it? Without wanting to sound patronistic, Professor Shibaju is one of the best hands that Nigeria can talk of, in every aspect of it. He has the academic mind. Being a lawyer, is at the top. He's an ethically balanced man. And we have seen a bit of what he could do at sometimes when he but can you, and to some of us in the private sector, at times we keep asking ourselves, so what are those limiting factors? So it's basically those issues that we're talking about.
So to move forward, that means we have to tinker with the structure of the public sector. Definitely.
You know, it's not just a matter of, if you use the word tinker looks like something so cosmetic. You need to bring down the structure and get it all over again. People call it restructuring. People call it, but there are some real situations that we need to deal with. And unfortunately for us, many of us still think central, and that should not really be. We're a federal structure, and we must face the reality of making this decision if you want Nigeria to move forward. And when you talk about restructuring, before you know it, tribal issue comes up, religious issue comes up, and whatever. But the reality is that there are several things that the federal government is doing that they don't need to bother themselves with those things. I'll give those things to the state and to the local government, and we can move on.
Mr. Wakalade, let's look at ICSAN, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. Now, our viewers would like to know, what is this all about, this institute?
I'll give some specific issues that will make us to understand where the institute comes from. People ask secretaries, what does it really mean? But they sometimes think it's those typists and whatever. You know, we are colonized by Britain. In Britain, when they are talking about their top administrators, they will say secretary to the government of the federation, secretary to transportation, secretary to the state and whatever. That is topmost administrative language that they will use. So that is the same thing that we borrow from, because our institute was an offshoot of the ICSA of UK, because before it now became International Institute. So that's where the issue of secretaries came from. Then when you come to the private sector, for every company there is a company secretary. Some companies will say company secretary, legal advisor, but to us, to every company there's a company secretary, and that is what the law, CAMA even says, that for every PLC you must have a company secretary, and that person is the engine of the system that coordinates all of the activities towards ensuring that the company's activities are fulfilled. So that is the strength of our institute and ourselves, and that's what we basically do. Then all this issue of corporate governance I will also talk about. That is the flagship. We are the hub of corporate governance professionals, and then what that means is that for every system to be stable and to achieve its purpose, whether family business, small scale, medium scale, or even PLC, you need the charter secretary. Some people call them corporate secretaries. Some people call them they are governance professionals. Those names are interwoven. So that is the hub, that is the strength of our institute, and that is the strength of our members. So for every company secretary that you see, it combines the ability to know law, ability to know ability to know compliance, ability to know financial management, because it's the engine. And for you to be that engine, you must know something about everything that drives that business. So when you say the institute, we are like the engine of the nation.
Okay, so does it mean that anybody who hasn't passed through this institute, or who's not aspiring to be a member of this institute, is not eminently qualified to hold those positions that I mentioned?
Well, let me also say that the law, and that is the law cover allows 3 sets of people to practice as company secretary. It talks about anybody who's our own member, it talks about a lawyer, it talks about chartered accountants. But the truth of the matter is that without sounding egoistic, I'm also a lawyer and I'm also a chartered secretary, so I can speak from that statement. But I will tell you conveniently that never at a time in the law school or even in law universities that they will teach you about financial management. They teach us strictly law. Do you understand? And when you come into practice, the knowledge of law alone won't take you. Because if you say you are the company secretary and they submit the financial report of the company, I cannot go through it. So what role are you playing as a company secretary? So you need to also have a sound knowledge of financial issues. So the same thing if you now say, okay, you are appointing an accountant as that secretary. How much of knowledge of law does he know? How much of knowledge of administration does he know? So the only, amongst all these 3, the only one that has the capacity and the ability to play that role effectively is the company secretary. And I'm not saying that because I'm one, I'm saying that because that is the truth. Because like I also told you, I'm both a lawyer and this, but I know that the knowledge of secretarial practice has given me a huge advantage and made me to be a much more handed person. So without a company secretary in a nation, that nation will be groping in darkness.
What about companies that don't have secretaries?
Well, the law says that private companies don't need it. Okay. And when you say private companies, because they are taken to be just small companies. But we now start having private companies that are becoming big, because private only is just by choice. We have some private companies that are very big, so they don't go by that law. They know that they need a company secretary to help them to run their business effectively.
Now, since you became president of this institute, what would you say have been those things that you have actually brought to the table that have created some difference from what it used to be in the past?
Well, my institute is a going concern, and to us, it's not a matter of one government comes and you wipe off the activity of the other. You have to just build on those activities. But one of those flagships that we're looking at going forward is that push a lot of advocacy. Some of the companies are not doing well, whether private or public. Look at it, it's because they don't have some of those competent persons, like our members, that will be able to play those roles. So one of those issues that we're ensuring is that to keep pushing these advocacy issues amongst these things that we are doing, so that let people start knowing that a company is meant to be a going concern, and for you to get it right, you need to get the right manpower that can help you. And if you don't have a corporate secretary in your organization as an employee, get him as an advisor so that they can help you to move on. For you to move far, for you to move fast, you can move alone. But for you to move so far and well too, you need a charter secretary that can help you to see that far and then get you there faster than necessary.
So it's a compulsion for modern day companies. I mean, if you don't have one, then
you have not started.
You are living in
you have not started. You have not started, and that is the truth. If you have a system that doesn't have a company secretary, either as an advisor or as a real person running the system, you will be moving on. But sincerely speaking, you have not started. You have not started.
Kama emphasizes this, right?
Yeah.
And how far? Because sometimes too, government comes up with policies, and they don't follow up. They don't implement. They don't enforce.
Well, the new Kama was 2018, so we are just in the era of implementation.
2018. This is 2021.
No, because there are some aspects of that law that are revolutionary. So government itself is we have to keep giving government that a bit of whatever it is, because government is a huge corporation, and it's going to take them some time. It takes the elephant some time to also dance. Not like so we just allow government to have its way, but there are huge opportunities waiting for government to tap into, and also to ensure that they fulfill what we have. A simple example: there are many of government bodies that they are supposed to have their board constituted. As we speak, many of them still don't have those boards, and if you don't have a board, there are very little that you can do. So just allow government to take its time and get there.
Okay.
So are there punishments? Sorry, let me just ask. Are there punishments for government not having boards?
I think it's a moral burden.
Okay.
And that is the insincerity that we're talking of. But to be for a private sector, the regulator will just bounce on you. They will not even approve your books. If you're a PLC, the Nigerian Stock Exchange will not look at you. CAC, you must file your books every time, and all of those issues. SEC is there if for all of those issues. So we have a lot of regulators that are also there, checking also that the private sector is working. But for public sector, who is that regulator? They are the regulator on their own. The same body telling you that you must do this, himself does not comply with those situations. So you just and they don't have, who will punish them?
Now, on the final note, Mr. Awokala, is the institute branched everywhere in Nigeria?
Oh, yes.
Everywhere?
Even in Abeokuta.
In all the 36 states of the Federation?
Well, because the truth is that if we are preaching that everybody should have an access to us, then the meaning that must also be all over the Federation. There are some places that for now we don't really have, but there is no axis of Nigeria where you don't have a representative. That at least somebody is always there to ensure that he listens to you and he helps if there are needs for
so in Abeokuta,
we have a very functional chapter in Abeokuta. Okay. In fact, even when I live here, we also are going to have a meeting with them so that we'll keep seeing how far we can entrench the institute the more.
I want to wish you the best of luck, Mr. Awokala. Thank you so much for coming on this program and for really educating us on the issue of corporate governance and the public administration in Nigeria. Certainly, when need arises, we have to bring you back. You live in Lagos, and this is your hometown.
Yeah, I'm from Ogun State. And I think, let me also sincerely say that I never saw the import this achievement until I actually became the president, because the quantum of responses that I've received from Ogun State has actually made me so proud. So when this opportunity came, I said, "Oh, who am I?" It's an no coming. I had my presentation on Tuesday last week at Moson Center, and the deputy governor was his special guest of honor. She wasn't available because of the demise of the father of the governor. So she's been the one around trying to, but she sent a very powerful delegation to represent. So, and the people who came said, "Oh, one of those reasons that they actually ensured that they must also come is the fact that they have an Ogun State person heading this kind of a multi-skilled institute, which is also an internationally recognized institute." So those kind was really made me so happy that my state actually recognized the fact that one has reached to this kind of a level. So I want to thank the administration for understanding that and for showing that one thing. I also want to thank OGTV. We are not the one that made this move. It came from you, so it's also part of those appreciations. We want to thank you so much, and I want to promise that for this era, we'll do everything possible to also ensure that the state that I come from have a lot of partnership going forward.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, we're having Mr. Taiwo Omoba. Taiwo, I think we missed that. Taiwo Oga, president of ICSAN in the studio, and we'll be looking at corporate governance and public administration.